Hi, I'm Tom Montgomery Fate, and I teach creative writing here at College of DuPage. Today I'm pleased to be joined by Chicago writer Susan Messer. Susan's work has appeared in the North American Review, Glimmer Train Stories, Creative Nonfiction, the Colorado Review, and others. She's also the author of the novel Grand River and Joy. First, Susan will share with us readings from both her novel and related essay. Then we'll have a discussion about craft, exploring how fiction and nonfiction sometimes converge.
I'm going to read a little bit from the beginning of this essay called What the Halloween Man Brought. It's Halloween, a balmy, magical night for children. My husband took our daughter out trick-or-treating, and I'm alone at home. A nice two-story stucco house in an old tree-lined suburb right on the edge of Chicago's west side. With half an hour of official trick-or-treat time left, I'm down to my last few Tootsie Rolls. I switch to spare change, nickels, pennies, a few dimes I find lying around. I've got them in a ceramic bowl near the door. I pick up a few coins, drop them in the waiting bags. The kids try to see what landed, but their bags have so much candy, and I drop the coins so fast that they can't see them. One little boy says, "Hey, that lady's giving out quarters." I'm not enjoying myself. I recognize few kids from the neighborhood, can't tell what any of the costumes are, and hate to guess, since I'm usually wrong. Vans park on my street and unload bunches of kids. Some don't have costumes at all, just a mask or a smudge of makeup on their little faces. They carry huge, dingy pillowcases of candy, and some seem awfully big for trick-or-treating. They arrive on my porch in large groups, 9, 10 at a time, faces shadowed by their jacket hoods, real-life wraiths who make me afraid to open the door. The bell rings again, and I look out. It's a man. No kids. I wonder why he's there, whether I should open the door, but the spirit of Halloween presses me on. "I don't mean any disrespect, ma'am," he says. He holds a mask in one hand as some kind of credential. He stretches the other hand toward me, palm up, a soft brown bowl. "I heard you were giving out quarters." We both look at my bowl. My wife and I, we wanted to take the children out for hot dogs after trick-or-treating. The ceiling light in my front hall shines like a spotlight on the coins, 6 pennies and 2 nickels. I slide them around with the tip of my finger. I want this man to go away. I tip the bowl toward him so he can see its contents. So that's the essay, and this is so that was something that actually happened to me one Halloween a number of years ago, and the essay was published in the Chicago Reader, and it ends up being about how we decide what to give and who to give to, and so you have the issue of Halloween, which is sort of playful giving, but then here's somebody at my door who's talking about real giving. So this problem stayed with me, and a number of years later, when I published my novel, Grand River and Joy, some of these themes show up again, and I'm going to just read a tiny bit from the beginning of the novel and then switch to a later scene where you'll see the same issue of giving. First I'll start just right from the first page. He was working with his sister at the time, so it was just the two of them, and he stopped to pick her up on the way down, which was how he described the trip. "I'm heading down," he would say to her when he called before leaving the house. "Are you ready?" All he meant by down, or all he thought he meant, was that the route to the business took him more toward downtown than not. He drove his silvery blue Dodge Dart, a new model, 1966, through the streets of his neighborhood over to hers, the autumn elms and oaks and sugar maples arching over the streets, stopping in front of her house, her waiting on the porch when the weather was fine, as it was that day. A perfect golden day for Halloween, something you couldn't rely on in the Midwest. They said their hellos, Harry and Ilo, not much new since yesterday. He'd come to feel that this was his life, and this was how it would be, from today until tomorrow, and on, not a bad life, with his wife, his daughters, your basic comforts, summer vacations at the Michigan lakes, the great and the small. Then he and Ilo were nearing the end of their well-worn route down, making the turn onto Grand River, crossing Joy Road. And so, as you see, my novel opens on Halloween, which somewhat frames it as a book about identities, but also about this issue of giving. And so in a chapter later in the book, I have this scene where Harry Levine, who's the main character, has had a hobby of collecting old bicycles for years, collecting old bicycles and fixing them up. And one day he decides that he's going to load them all onto a truck and drive into this book takes place in Detroit, I should say, drive them into a poor neighborhood of Detroit and just give them all away. So here we have him. One man came up to the driver's side window. He threw his cigarette into the gravel as he did. He was thin and brown with a scraggly beard, wiry little black hairs that grew on his chin and cheeks in patches, like the thin patches of grass that dotted the empty fields around the shoebox houses. His brown wool jacket, stained and fraying, hung on him a few sizes too big, like he was in the process of shrinking, while everything else around him, the jacket as one indicator, stayed the same. Harry rolled down his window. "You moving furniture?" the man asked. The cold morning air came in with the man's voice. Harry turned down the rattling fan on the heater. "I can do just about anything." Joanna, this is his daughter, withdrew into the corner of the cab pressed against the door. She stared ahead at the little houses, wondering how many people could fit in one. When she'd agreed to come, she'd pictured children and bicycles and joy. This was something different. "I'm sorry," Harry said, "I'm not looking for workers right now." As if not looking for workers was a temporary situation. He might change his mind any minute. Something might come up as they sat there in the truck. Another man came up to the truck. "What's he looking for?" the new man asked. He wore a red scarf tied like an ascot. He didn't look at Harry, but at his fellow day laborer, as if he were the translator, as if there were no point speaking directly to the foreigner. "He ain't said yet," the first man said. He hadn't said because this was not an easy question to answer. The thing was that he wasn't really looking for anything he could say in a way that would make sense to these men, who were looking for something far more tangible and important than what Harry was looking for. At least that's how it seemed to him at the moment. And he couldn't simply say, "I'm looking for children," because that would probably make him sound suspicious. And he couldn't say, "insurance," which was how he'd explained this outing to his family, because these men would know that this was not a place that a man like him came looking for insurance, and certainly not in a big old truck with rattling cargo that said, "Formica City." And he certainly couldn't explain to them what he meant by insurance, because that would be an insult, like saying, "I'm here to bribe you, so you won't rob me." "I've got a truckload of bikes," Harry said, he indicated with his thumb, to give to the children. Two more men had come up by now. "What did he say?" one asked. "Something about bikes," said another, "for the children." "Bikes," said the first one, adjusting his cap. "Bikes?" He paused. "What are you, Santa Claus or something?" The other men laughed. "You sure don't look like Santa Claus." Which made Harry wonder whether this meant that the man knew he was Jewish, whether they could guess, whether it showed on his face. "Nope," Harry said, "not Santa Claus. Just have a lot of bikes and want to give them away where someone might be able to use them." "You brought your assistant with you?" the man with the red scarf said, "an elf or something?" "She's my daughter," Harry said. 7 or 8 men had gathered around the truck by now, all on Harry's side. "Well, come on then," the man with the red scarf said. "Show us what you brought." Harry hesitated. He had envisioned himself surrounded by children, not grown men. But these men didn't seem threatening. Harry was a man, too. They were standing near 8 Mile with lots of traffic passing, and if they stole all his bikes, well, he had come to give them away, so what would be the difference? He turned off the engine and got out. "You really got a truck full of bikes?" the man in the brown jacket asked. "Yes, I do," Harry said. He walked around the back of the truck. He opened the padlock and slid the door up. What a racket it made, groaning and clanking up its tracks. He stood aside and the men looked. "He's got bikes," a man with a black cap said. "He sure does," said the one with the red scarf. By then a few women and children, a few teenaged girls had gathered. Harry left the back open and went to get Joanna. "Come on," he said, "it's okay." She sat plastered against the door. She didn't want to get out. She wanted to go home. "Come on," he said again. She shook her head no. But then she saw a little boy standing behind Harry and watching her. Maybe he was 7 or 8, dark and wiry. He wore a striped t-shirt and his hair was closely shorn, looking like a tight, fuzzy cap. He was eating a piece of toast, and she remembered the notebooks she used to keep with the rows and columns and check marks, her bike inventory. What was the point in keeping track and accumulating and having an inventory if it hung on hooks, jammed in and increasingly tangled in a basement? Bikes were for riding, and here was a little customer. She opened her door, slid down from the truck, and walked around the back, staying close to Harry, keeping her eyes to herself, embarrassed that someone might recognize her from school or that she might recognize them. Harry pulled a wooden step stool from the truck, unfolded it, and motioned for Joanna to climb up. He followed her, and together they untangled a small huffy, one that seemed like it would fit the small boy in the striped shirt, pulling and lifting it out from the rest, moving others out of the way, pedals getting caught in spokes of neighboring bikes, handlebars hitching onto each other. He wheeled it forward. He held it out over the side of the truck, the small bicycle hanging in the air in his hands. "Here, son, would you like this one?" The boy nodded, staring at the bike, finishing the last bite of toast, wiping his fingers on his pants. "Go ahead," Harry said, "it's yours." Other people came closer to see what it was about, to see if the boy would take it, to see if this was a joke or a trick that the white man was playing, that he would grab it back once the boy reached out, that he would laugh or insult, call the boy greedy, that he would call the police later in the day maybe to give the description of the striped shirt, the shaved head, a boy perhaps 7 or 8. The man with the red scarf was there, as was the man in the brown jacket. They watched. "It's real," Joanna said. "Come on, take it. Look how many we have." The boy looked. "Are you going to take it?" Harry asked. He got down from the truck and put the bike on the ground in front of the boy. The boy stooped to look at it. He spun the rear tire. "It's yours," Harry said. "Do you know how to ride?" The boy nodded while tracing his finger over the handlebars to the blue and white plastic streamers that hung from them. He held the streamers in his hand as if he were weighing them. "Well, good," Harry said.
First, welcome, Susan.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you here at the college to share your work.
Happy to be here.
Maybe we could start off just talking about the 2 pieces you just read. The first piece, a nonfiction essay that was in the Chicago Reader about an experience that you had in your home, and then a kind of parallel excerpt from your new novel. How do you see those 2 as related, or you got Halloween in both occasions? What's the connection between those 2, or how do you see them?
These issues of socioeconomic difference have been a concern of mine for as long as I can remember. I grew up in a neighborhood that was had a wide socioeconomic range, an integrated school with. Well, my family was, sort of solidly middle class, but there was a large black population that lived not far away in public housing.
This is in Detroit?
In Detroit, yes.
Where the novel takes place. Yeah.
Where my novel takes place, correct. So I was always aware of you know, these differences between us, and we would, you know, what my house looked like as compared to what the public houses looked like, and now I live in Oak Park, Illinois, and one day, especially when my daughter started at the high school in Oak Park, I thought, well, this is interesting. How did it happen that I'm living in the same kind of place now that I lived in then, where there's a very wide socioeconomic range in a very small area, and I think a small geographic area, and at the high school you have, you know, you can really see that, and I thought, you know, I think that's a very rich environment for a young person, and a confusing environment. It makes me think about, you know, how do we see each other? What does it look like to somebody to see me in a nice stucco house who doesn't have that? What is it like to come to my door and ask for candy? So just the issue of socioeconomic difference, how we see each other, how do we give to somebody who has less? If we want to give, how do we give? These are issues that have been preoccupations of mine for a long time, and so they show up in my writing again and again.
And Oak Park, like you described your childhood too, as a location where a large black community and a white community meet. So there's this kind of opportunity and challenge right there that you kind of live in. And I felt that in the moment at your house, that opportunity and challenge, you know, between black and white, you know, almost kind of compressed into a moment, which is, I think what I really admire about your work is how you're able to take these huge social issues and boil them down into the moment in two people's lives, you know, and then there's something about that scene that I think just kind of invites readers into, well, what would I do? Where am I in this dilemma?
That's what I would hope for, because I certainly didn't know what to do in that moment, and I think that issue of not knowing what to do is what, you know, kind of gets the itch going to write about it and maybe work something out in the process. So.
Okay.
And I also want to say that it's not just black and white, but it's the way the economic differences merge with race so much in our culture, and where I live now and where I lived in Detroit.
Yeah. Can you talk about the writing the essay and writing the novel? I mean, are you the kind of writer who plots everything out beforehand and kind of knows where you're going? Or are you the kind of writer who kind of makes the road by walking, discovers what matters, who the characters are, etc.?
I think it's a little bit of both. The Halloween essay, that was such an interesting experience for me, and I think that this comes up a lot in my writing, and sort of the more I write, the more this seems to happen. But I had that Halloween night experience with that man, and it really bothered me a lot because I didn't know what the right thing to do was, and I ended up not giving him anything, but, you know, sort of sending him away and saying, you know, that's not what Halloween's about. Halloween's for children. It's, you know, and closing the door on him and feeling very uncomfortable about whether that was the right decision, or I don't think there is a right decision. You know, but I was preoccupied with it and the idea of, you know, is there a right thing to do? And so it was on my mind, and then fortuitously, and this is, you know, coincidence, the role coincidence plays in my life as a writer is it's a very important thing, but, you know, a few days after this Halloween incident, I received something a piece in the mail. I don't even remember where it was from, but it articulated Maimonides' dimensions of charitable giving. And Maimonides was a Jewish scholar from like the 1400s, or I probably have the century wrong, but a long time ago. And he articulated what he called dimensions of giving. it sets them out as almost as levels, numbered, a numbered list. It's so convenient. It's such a convenient way to think about something, and so it seemed to fit with how I was feeling about and wondering and worrying about giving, and so that seemed like somebody ringing my bell or knocking on my door and saying, it's time to sit down and write about this. You have had this experience, and now you have this way of structuring it, these dimensions of giving. And so together, and then I went around and started asking people, well, what would you do in this situation? And if you read the essay, Tom is one of the, I asked him what he would do, and he told me what his family does and other people. So it's a combination of all these things, the experience, what people I know say and do, and the dimensions organized around the dimensions of giving structure is so important in a piece. So that was really a process of discovery. And I would say with my novel, I sort of more knew where I was going because it grew out of a short story that was already written, and the novel is sort of an expansion of the short story. It's not like I took the short story and it made it one chapter in the book. I took the short story and I stretched it open because I felt it had a lot of socio-economic and historical and political ramifications and resonances. So no, I don't have it all plotted out beforehand. It's definitely.
So with the essay then, rather than writing a continuous narrative, you seem to be suggesting that the essay kind of presented itself in a way that you're kind of thinking about it, you've started on it, and then this arrives in the mail, and then you think, oh, these 9 components, I think I'll try a fragmented or a highly structured essay that's compartmentalized and see how that works, and it seemed to work very well.
Yeah, it did. And then I in my writing group, which we were in a writing group together for many years, and one of the people in my writing group, Bill, said, why don't you send that off to the reader? Which I'd never thought about submitting to the reader before. I don't know why, I just never had. And I sent it off, and then boom, like 2 days later, they called me up and said they wanted it. And, as you well know, with, literary magazines, which is what we mainly submit to, it can be months, 4 months if you ever even hear from them. So that, boom, the reader, they're ready to put it in next week's issue. It was like, whoa, this is cool.
Who, me?
This is great,
Maybe we can back up a little bit, and you could talk a little more about how you came to be a writer, like what your, I don't know, from childhood on, or where you got that, that drive.
Yeah, the biggest thing to say about how I became a writer, I think, is that it took me so long, and this is one of the, I would say, perhaps regrets of my life. I didn't have the confidence to think of myself as being able to do any kind of creative work, and I didn't realize how active my imagination was, or that imagination meant anything, or so I was just sort of going along in life, and I was working as an editor, which also sort of happened to me by accident. I always feel like life happened to me rather than me setting off with an agenda or a goal. So I was working as an editor, which is, a very close study of written language, and I feel has informed my writing and enriched my writing, and the sentence, what makes a good sentence, a good paragraph, so even though I wasn't thinking of myself as a writer, I was thinking of myself as an editor, and doing this close study of language every day, and then I was lucky enough, and sort of like that thing coming through my mail slot for the Maimonides Dimensions of Giving. On a freelance editorial job, I met a woman named Etta Worthington, who was starting a writers group. She was a writer, and she was feeling lonely, and she wanted to get people together. So she must have seen something in me if she invited me to come. And I said, well, I'm not a writer, I'm an editor. And I wasn't a writer, I wasn't writing. And well, why don't you come anyway? And so I'd go to went to the meeting, and people would tell me what they were writing, and they'd say, what are you writing? And I would say, well, I'm not a writer, I'm an editor. And so they would like move off to talk to somebody who was a writer. But you know, she kept, you know, pulling me, not it wasn't in a pushy way. If it had been pushy, it probably would have scared me off, but it was just something about her. And so she just kept, well, why don't you, then she started offering, this organization started offering workshops, and well, why don't you take one of those? And so gradually, she kind of pulled me into it, and people responded to my work. That was the thing. If people respond, you know, people who in the workshops who I thought, whose work was way beyond me, I thought, you know, would say, you know, would you like to exchange work? Or I know I'm going to see your work published, and, you know, so I got encouragement, and then I got serious. And that's when I got really serious about it.
So then when you were very serious, when you were a very serious writer, then do you have a particular kind of practice? Do you write certain days of the week, certain hours, certain keys, certain composers?
Yeah, no, I'm not like with the teas or the composers. I know people who have to have like a, you know, fresh flowers or, you know, the certain music, or no, I'm not like that. My environment is not very important. Actually, I have a very cluttered, tend to be a very cluttered person. If you saw my office or my living room, it's like, so it's not the environment, but it's the discipline of the time, the dedicated time. So when I got serious about being a writer, I decided that every Sunday morning from 8 to noon, I was going to write. And I wouldn't let anything else get in the way. I wouldn't answer the phone. You know, so I started doing that, and you know, by Wednesday night, I'd start to think about, well, what am I going to work on Sunday? And in that way, I made a lot of progress. Meaning, I guess, I generated a lot of work, started getting things published, and time passed. You know, won some awards.
Can I stop you? Mm-hmm. How did you, like, you started getting things published, how did you make, again, this is for people that are like thinking about trying to publish things, how did you decide to send things out, or like at what point in the career, and was that, you know, fearful, or like, you know, or did you, like, I got nothing to lose? I mean, some people send out 50 things, some people send out 3.
That's a really interesting question. I think the reason I started sending things out was because in there was a woman in one of those workshops who said to me, oh, I know what it was. Well, okay, she said to me, I know I'm going to start seeing your stuff around, which made me think, and I really liked her work a lot, so that made me think that maybe it was my work was worthy of sending out. And so I started, you know, learning about literary magazines, and you know, there's lots and lots of them out there. You know, when I was starting, they were all print. Now, of course, there's a lot of online magazines as well. It's just a whole job just to learn about them. And then, of course, as with everything else, there's a hierarchy. There's, you know, some that, you know, like you'd really, really like to get your stuff in, and you know, they're harder, you know, harder to get in, and easier and all along the way. So I just put together, you know, a list of places I thought I'd like to have my work. And I do remember very clearly the first rejection notice I got. I just was devastated. I mean, I was very selective in what I sent and where. And the first one, I mean, it felt so personal. It was just a little form thing, but it felt so personal to me. I was just devastated, but it didn't destroy me. So then I continued sending, and then pretty quickly, I have to say, I got a piece accepted by North American Review, which, you know, was in the, you know, upper levels of the hierarchy. So, you know, those kind of validations are, you know, I mean, it's just creates the momentum and the motivation to continue. So,
So when you were an editor, did you edit fiction and nonfiction, or all
No,
nonfiction?
All nonfiction,
Oh, okay.
yeah. And all kind, I mean, scholarly work
Right.
and textbooks and professional books, and I mean, nothing lyrical or,
Right.
or literary, but still it was the study, you know, the study of the
Oh yeah, yeah.
the close study of written language, and I feel like I really know how to do a sentence. You know,
Oh yeah, and so many great novelists were editors or are editors, you know. Maybe a final question. I'm kind of curious again because you write in fiction and nonfiction. I think you're working on another novel now, right? So how do you see the relationship between those two, or do you prefer one over the other, or any thoughts about that?
That's yeah, you know, that's hard to even, for me to even know. I have been working mainly with fiction lately. For quite a while, I was switching back and forth between fiction and nonfiction, and it's very hard for me to even say, you know, why I would choose one over the other, how it happened. So much of this is organic and intuitive, and blundering about. You know, I can't say that I really know. But some things just seem to be suited more to nonfiction, and others to fiction, and but of course, fiction has elements of nonfiction in it. My novel about Detroit in the '60s, you know, has, you know, people and events that really happened in the real world, and that are historically accurate. And actually, you know, lots of people like to write me emails, you know, catching me at mistakes about, you know, what month that actually did happen, or what her, you know, where she really did live, or did, you know, what, you know, sort of historical inaccuracies, I guess you could say.
And you did a fair amount of research for the book too,
yes,
right?
Yes,
In Detroit?
Yes, I spent some time in Detroit. I worked in the archives at the Walter Reuther Library, which was an amazing experience. I drove around the streets. I went to the Art Museum, the African American History Museum, the Historical Museum.
What, can I ask, what was the most useful of, do you remember, like, can you think of an example of some of the research that became important in the novel? You know, like,
I see.
Well, maybe not specific. Do you know what I mean? Like, what kinds of things? Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, this is sort of funny.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like not, isn't the boiler.
Yeah.
I have a scene that takes place in the boiler room of Harry's business. And in order to write that scene, I had to learn how boilers work. Which was an amazing experience. I wanted his boiler breaks down in the middle of the night, and his tenant calls him, and he drives down to the business to see if he can fix it. And so I needed to know what could go wrong, what would it smell like, what would it sound like, what would it feel like, would it be moist, would it be dry, would it be cold, would it be hot? And in order to do that, I did a lot of research. You know, just to be specific, I found there's this website called heatinghelp.com. And I put up, it's where all the boiler guys go to discuss their boiler issues. And they have a wall where you can post questions. And so I went one day and I posted this little notice saying, novelist needs realistic details about steam boilers. And I told them a little bit about my story. And for like 4 days, I was at the top of the charts on heatinghelp.com. These guys just came, you know, at it with, you know, all their knowledge and their imagination and their good humor. And
what a great idea.
It was.
And then you could layer all that expertise into the novel.
Yes,
yeah,
yes, yes. So that was, you know, one of the areas of research that was unexpected, but very interesting.
In closing, can you say anything about your new novel, or is that something you don't do?
I don't even know what to say about it, because I just finished a month long writing, sabbatical.
Yeah.
I've been working on it, and actually just before coming here today, I was working on it, and I'm close to the end. I mean, the end of a draft,
End, yeah.
not the end, but so it's really on my mind a lot. I could just say, structurally, I mentioned structure before and how important it is. This is not a story within a story, which is a form that I've always admired in literature and film. But and the two stories, of course, are supposed to, resonate off each other and echo off each other and weave in back and forth together. So it's, holding the whole thing in my mind. I mean, you can have it on a hard drive and you can have like little note cards and you can have little diagrams, but it still has to be in your mind as the ultimate, like storage receptacle, and trying to see how it holds together and whether it does is...
We'll be looking forward to it.
Oh, thank you. I will be too.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, thanks so much. It's been great.